Hi everyone, welcome to Global Government News. Today's Wednesday, October 21st, 2020. I posted some videos yesterday. You might want to check them out, talking about the mask, the vaccines, how they're being forced, how they're being forced onto the public, how they're doing it, how they're coercing people into it. Just some ridiculous stories. But I had a bunch of articles that I never got to, and this section, this fourth video, I believe, will be about the lockdown. So, many people are wondering. I mean, I'm sure most of you understand that they're going to drag this stuff out for as long as they possibly can, until we're living into some kind of futuristic, dystopian society that you see in movies. We're in these big mega cities with, basically militarized police, barbed wire fences and curfews and surveillance grids, drones flying over, extreme poverty, and a ruling elite ruling everybody. So we're going to ask the experts or see what the experts say as far as how long this is going to go on for, because they're going to keep telling the public that this is almost over. The World Health Organization chief hopes the coronavirus pandemic will end in under 2 years. So again, almost 18 months. They're following a plan. However, the world has become significantly more global since then, which gives the coronavirus a better chance of spreading. So I'm glad we did that, right? I'm glad we all got together and democratically came to the decision that we're going to become part of this globalist system, and it wasn't forced on us. We have the disadvantage of globalization, closeness, and connectedness. The advantage is better technology, so technology is going to save us. You may have to give up all your rights, but as long as you don't get the flu, it'll all be worth it. Dr. Fauci predicts when life will be normal again. He says in a best-case scenario, if the majority had immunity, it would still be over a year before any sort of normalcy exists. Late 2021. There's no going back to normal, the experts say. The sooner we accept that, the better. CNN has published an article asserting that people need to accept that things are never getting back to normal, and that mandatory coronavirus restrictions such as wearing face masks will become permanent. They say that the pre-corona world is now mere nostalgia, and that the public needs to come to terms with it. Along with other social distancing measures, Walsh says that the mandatory wearing of masks will become permanent and just a part of life. Citing comments by Thomas Davenport, a professor at Babson College, he said that those who refuse to wear masks may be guilty of normalcy bias, since they perceive this intrusion into their lives as a passing fad that they don't need to embrace. And de Blasio says, New York can't be normal until there are 0 cases. We made great progress on COVID-19, but we're not done until we hit 0. There is, of course, 0 chance of 0 cases. You've entered into a permanent virus regime. This won't end until the entire society has been transformed. The main thing is that you feel safe. COVID-19 crisis would have to be really, really bad to implement a national lockdown, says Fauci. October 19th, so he just said this, and he said this in the spring too, and of course we had a lockdown soon after that. And also, like I mentioned yesterday, you're seeing a lot of news articles, fear-mongering, sensationalizing, about how many cases there are, a spike in cases, a surge in cases. I just saw it earlier today in a local newspaper where they were saying a surge in COVID-19 cases has local hospitals concerned. They didn't say any deaths, they just said that the hospitals are concerned because there's more cases. He added that it's not safe yet to say the country is on the road to essentially getting out of this, because it's never going to end. I also thought it was interesting what he was saying in this interview. He's talking about opening up the economy, getting jobs back, or we could shut down. He says, no, put shut down away and say, we're going to use public health measures to help us safely get to where we want to go. So the first part was to do the actual lockdown where you physically tell people, you have to stay in your houses. You can't go shopping unless it's essential. You can't go to work, anything like that. and now they're trying out this new system, what we'll get into here, that they're rolling out in the UK, where they're going to have these different alert systems and color-coded alert systems. So little hotspots that they'll lock down and they'll open up. But mostly they're going to make wearing masks and social distancing permanent. In other words, they know that people do not want to be locked down again. And he even says it right here, the country is fatigued with restrictions. And this was about a month and a half ago. Fauci saying to prepare for lockdown part 2. And it goes on and says 30 states are reporting downward trends in COVID cases. This is in September. But it will likely worsen again. We need to hunker down and get through this fall and winter because it's not going to be easy, he said. The bell curve was the whole reason why we went into lockdown in the first place. Flatten the curve, remember? Lose your freedoms, stay locked in your house. To flatten the curve. I keep looking at that curve, he says, and I get more depressed and more depressed about the fact that we never really get down to the baseline that I'd like. So if you're starting to wonder how long this is going to go on, I think you got a pretty good idea so far. In Ireland, they ordered a full national lockdown. This was just the other day, October 19th. And the country faces 6 weeks of maximum level 5 restrictions with pubs and non-essential shops closed until December 1st. One of the strictest lockdowns in Europe. Measures include shutdown of non-essential retail, banning of public gatherings, and it actually says here limitation of movement, freedom of movement. Public will be told to stay at home with exercise permitted within a 3-mile radius of their home. Gatherings except for groups of 10 at funerals and 25 at weddings will be banned. So they admit that this whole level 5 restriction rollout has nothing to do with actually people dying in the streets. It's just about projections. The country, it says, because the evidence of a potentially grave situation arising in the weeks ahead was now too strong. But you don't want to shut down the schools, no. He said that schools would remain open because we cannot and will not allow our children and young people's futures to be another victim of this disease. He added, they need their education. They need to be brainwashed. You got to make sure that keeps going. I mentioned this in the video yesterday, I actually saw, along with one of the newspapers, about the exploding cases and how the hospitals are freaking out and begging for a lockdown, was what I just talked about education. It actually said some of the courses are still digital. They're still e-learning classes, even though the schools are now open. And keep moving here. It's kind of crazy that he actually says that we can't allow our children, young people's futures to be another victim of the disease. Well, they've destroyed their future. And it wasn't the disease that did it, it was them. It was these crazy level 5 restrictions and all of this, these policies. The Irish Premier said, I understand and feel very personally and profoundly the sense of disappointment, the feelings of loneliness, perhaps even the despair that this announcement will bring for many. The country would not be celebrating the same Christmas that we have enjoyed in the past. I even saw something about a virtual Thanksgiving. They're telling people not to celebrate Thanksgiving this year. In France, a 9 p.m. curfew announced to shut down nighttime virus activity. So every Western country is rolling out the second wave measures in full right now. They're much more extreme than the first measures from earlier this year in Britain, and I'll get to that here in a couple of minutes. Just announced a long-anticipated color-coded coronavirus alert system, which can be certain to be standardized across the West. So this 9 o'clock to 6 a.m. Curfew will come into effect for at least 4 weeks, says Macron. In Germany, they actually started curfews at bars and restaurants as well. What they're referring to as the second wave is actually the normal flu season that we have every single year. And back to that Irish article about funerals, there was a funeral recently that somebody that I knew was going to, and I was actually surprised that they were allowing funerals at this particular point. Not saying that I don't think they should have them. I think that the restrictions have become so ridiculous now and overreaching that I'm just surprised with all the power that they have, that they even allow people to get together. I mean, they're shutting down people's ability to go to church on Sundays and worship. So they're just going to shut down funerals, everything. UK the first to introduce Corona color code, creating total lockdown society. If you're in Europe or in the UK, I'm sure you already know all this. But if you're from the United States, you may not have seen this. But it probably will be coming to the US. And it kind of already is. You have a medium, high, and very high measures. The medium one, you follow the rule of 6 if meeting indoors and outdoors. Pubs and restaurants shut at 10, so curfews. The high level, no household mixing indoors. We saw an article yesterday about children, I think it was in Germany, children who have COVID-19 tested positive have to stay locked in their rooms and eat separately and wear a mask inside their house. And the very high part, our section, is guidance against traveling, so they're going to shut down traveling. All the bars and pubs, everything will be all shut down. Rule 6 applies in outdoor public spaces like parks. It says, what is household mixing? It's a new term for you to adopt and adapt to. It means that you're not allowed to visit your friends and your neighbors, and of course your ability to communicate on the internet is already vastly restricted. And this is a good point here. Each individual in society is being isolated so that they can be dealt with as individuals. So here's in New York, I was talking about their own little plan. The strategy will analyze micro-clusters on a block-by-block level. Cuomo reveals new COVID-19 plan. It also says that they shut down a 10,000-person wedding. This is what I was talking about. Cuomo said that targeting the coronavirus would no longer be at a statewide or regional level, but block-by-block. We're going to deploy a micro-cluster strategy. We've been targeting all of our actions either statewide or reopened on a regional level. Now we're going to analyze it block by block. We have data so specific that we can't show it because it would violate privacy conditions. This is part of the big surveillance grid that we were talking about. I talked about it in an article back in March. We know exactly where the new cases are coming from. And here he goes. A member of the New York City Test and Trace Corps hands out masks as part of the contact tracing app that they had. See where who's infected and where they're going and I got to keep moving here, but the last part of this article is the zones. Microclusters would be declared red zones. Areas buffering red zones would be deemed orange zones, depending on the cluster density, and the areas outside the buffer zones would be yellow zones. Cuomo says, a cluster signifies a lack of compliance and common sense. The only answer is more enforcement. And what's behind the WHO's lockdown mixed messaging? It says here, I want to say it again, the World Health Organization does not advocate lockdowns as a primary means of control of this virus. German minister says a lockdown will kill more people than COVID-19 does. 500,000 more will die from tuberculosis, people who don't get care because the hospitals won't allow them in. Again, in Germany, Angela Merkel urges people to stay home whenever possible, and she calls for additional contact tracers. A Google search study suggests pandemic may cause future surge in suicide rates. It seems as though individuals are grappling with the immediate stresses of job loss and isolation and reaching out to crisis services. So the algorithm detected dramatic search increases for phrases like I lost my job and words such as unemployment, furlough. Meanwhile, depression-related searches showed a slight increase, and searches regarding panic attacks are up moderately. Coronavirus toll. Too old to find new jobs. Laid off white Americans are giving up. One person says they filed for unemployment but hasn't received a dime. They say I'm barely making it, and if it wasn't for their family, they'd be homeless. In the UK, national lockdown would throw millions into unemployment. The pandemic has benefited one group of people, billionaires. Billionaires make $53 billion in 1 week as small businesses continue to close. This is GGN. Thank you.